So this video is for the work that was covered in school week commencing July the 5th for those people that were unable to come into school, for those of you that are studying the separate sciences, and this is the biology section. So this video starts off looking at the beginning of chapter 5. Chapter 5 is homeostasis, and we're just going to cover very briefly what homeostasis is first of all. So on the accompanying worksheet you will need to fill in the gaps as they appear. So what is homeostasis? Well, homeostasis can be summed up as saying it's a way of maintaining a constant internal environment. So there are various conditions within the body that we need to keep the same. So the body monitors both our internal and external conditions and stimuli, and then responds accordingly to keep conditions the same. So these might include things like your blood sugar, your water content, but also it's a way of keeping you safe. So it's a way of responding to changes from outside of the body, so in terms of things, flying towards your eye or loud sounds. And the two systems that work together on this are your nervous system and your hormonal or your endocrine system. And we can summarise these by looking at this particular table. So we've got our nervous system there and our hormonal system, and then we're going to have a quick chat about differences between them. So we're talking first of all about the speed in which they respond. Now these are usual ways in which they respond, and I'll give you some sort of examples of differences in a second. So the speed. Your nervous system responds incredibly quickly to any sort of stimuli. Your hormonal system tends to respond a little bit slower. So things like blinking, something comes toward your eye, is very fast. Things like changing your blood sugar levels take a little bit longer. There is one exception to this, and that is the release of adrenaline and your responses to adrenaline. But generally, your nervous system responds much quicker and your hormonal system is much slower. But in terms of the duration, your nervous system is over very quickly. So if something comes towards your eye, you blink, it's over and done with. But on the other hand, your hormonal system, the hormones can last in the blood for a lot longer, and so can have a lot longer term effect. Your nervous system is electrical. The messages or impulses that pass around the body are electrical, whereas your hormonal system relies on your hormones, which are chemical. Your nervous system has a specific system to travel around in, and that is the neurons, which are the cells that make up the nerves, whereas your hormonal system relies on carrying the chemical messengers, the hormones, in the blood. Now, for the rest of this, we're going to concentrate on the nervous system. And the first thing we're going to look at are the 3 different neurons. So again, as we go through this, you need to fill in your accompanying worksheet. So the first neuron we're going to look at is what we refer to as a sensory neuron. And they look a little bit like this. Now, this is obviously a very shortened version. They are actually incredibly long. But this part here, the cell body, the part that contains the nucleus, it sits sticking up from one side of the neuron. The neurons have an incredibly long part called an axon, and they at one end have receptors. That might be receptors in your eye or in your ear or in your nose or in your tongue or in your skin. And then those impulses travel all the way along this to this end. These are inside your central nervous system. So, sensory neurons transmit impulses from the receptors to the central nervous system. So these are incredibly long. So this could be a receptor in your big toe, and it would enter your central nervous system, which is like your brain and your spinal cord, at the base of your spine. So this could be the entire length of your leg. Now, one single cell is a neuron. Lots of these cells joined together make a nerve. Now, in your central nervous system, you have relay neurons, and the job of the relay neuron is to take in the information from the sensory neurons, decide what to do with it, and then send that information out via a motor neurone. So the sensory neurons connect to the relay neurons, and then the relay neurons connect to the motor neurons. They are only found in your central nervous system, so only found in your brain and your spinal cord. That is your central nervous system. Lastly, we have the motor neurons. Now, motor neurons get things done, like motors. They're a slightly different shape. At one end, they have their cell body with the nucleus inside of it. They then have a very long axon, and then they go down here to the end to what we call an effector. So the effector is usually a muscle or a gland. So this is inside the central nervous system. This goes to your muscles or your glands. Okay, so we have sensory neurons, relay neurons, and motor neurons. Between these, in the gaps between the sensory neurons and the relay neurons, and the relay neurons and the motor neurons, we have something called a synapse. And here, what happens is the electrical impulse comes along and gets turned into a chemical message which passes across the synapse, and then an electrical impulse is generated and it carries on. So basically it's a tiny little gap and the electrical impulse can't jump across, so we release these chemicals, they're called neurotransmitters in the posh name, which pass across. Why we have the synapses is so that the relay neurons and the sensory neurons can communicate with lots of different motor neurons. And there's got a good video on the BBC Bite Size which we will link so that you can go and watch that as well. Now, everything that you do follows a particular pathway, and some things that you do not go through the conscious part of your brain. You do not think about them. And these are called the reflex actions. It says there they're automatic and rapid. So examples of those are if something comes towards your eye, you blink. If somebody hits you just under the knee, then your bottom of your leg will kick out. It's called the knee jerk reaction. And what they do is they help protect you. They're there to stop from danger and to protect you. So here's a brief overview. So here's somebody's hand, here's our sensory neuron going into their central nervous system, and the motor neuron coming out to their effector. Now, most diagrams you see of a reflex action will look like this. This is a reflex arc, and what it's showing is the sensory neuron coming in to the spinal cord. This is a section through a spinal cord, and then we have the relay neuron, and then we have the motor neuron coming out here. So, but this could also happen inside your brain. Okay, if it's your eyes, closest part of your central nervous system is your brain, but often the diagrams you look at will look like this. So in comes our electrical impulse from here. It synapses with a with a relay neuron, that synapses with a motor neuron, and it sends out a message, an electrical impulse to whatever's going to happen. So they all follow this same path. We have a stimulus, so that could be something coming towards your eye. The receptor, that would be your eye. The sensory neuron then takes that message into the central nervous system, which is your coordinator. That then sends electrical impulse via your motor neuron, which then to the effector and causes a response. So it might be that you then blink. And all reflex arcs follow the following path. They do not go through the conscious part of your brain, and they're there for protection. So if we have a look at an exam question like this, the first part says, on the diagram, name the structures W, X and Y. So I suggest that you pause the video, have a go at this exam question, and then we will come back to it. So first of all, what is W? Y, Y is the spinal cord. It says do not accept spine. Okay, it has to be spinal cord. W is our receptor, and X is our effector or muscle. Okay, right, and then we've got the control of blood sugar is an example of an action controlled by hormones. Give two ways in which a reflex action is different from an action controlled by hormones. So we could have its reflex action is quicker, and it does say you can accept the reverse argument, that it's over a shorter period of time, that hormones involve the blood system and reflex involves neurons, or the reflex involves impulses and hormones involves chemicals. So any two of those would get you the 2 marks available, or reflex actions only affect one part of the body. Okay, so that is it for an overview of the nervous system in chapter 5.